Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby. I'm so happy we're always dancing.
We're always dancing when we do it. Yeah, I felt like you were really in rhythm there with the head movement, and I was not at all. But it's kind of hard over the internet. You know, it's a hard thing to do. But today is exciting because we're doing a discussion episode because I've been kind of full bore in a comedy contest right now. I don't have time really to do research, but this is something I wanted to talk about for a really long time, and that is we're going to call it the state of arcades in 2023.
Yeah.
Because I like an arcade. Tyler, how do you feel about going to an arcade?
You know, I don't particularly love arcades. I don't really think I ever have. Even as a kid, like sure I'd play games in arcades, but I just don't have like nostalgia for old arcades. And like whenever people are like, let's go to a barcade. Tyler will love that. He loves video games. Like, I just don't really love arcades. I don't.
Dude, it's like when people are like, oh, you do stand-up comedy. You'd love to go see this like improv show. I'm like, those are two very different things.
Yeah. Well, improv's tough. There's a low floor, high ceiling. Like,
oh yeah, it's one of those
low
things.
Lows and high highs, and the lows are more often than the highs. But a good improv show is very good.
A good improv show is good. A bad improv show, really bad. I will look into the camera when I say that. Yeah, so my experience with arcades is like growing up in Alaska in the 90s, and Alaska in itself is like kind of always 10 years behind. Like it's got that small town feel to it. Like, and when I was in, like, it was probably 1996. I'm a kid. I'm like 8 years old. We would go to the Chuck E. Cheese in Anchorage, which was like an hour drive away. It was a very exciting time for us as kids. And they had the Chuck E. Cheese on the bottom. And then on top, they had like the third party arcade, still owned by the people that own the Chuck E. Cheese, but not necessarily sanctioned by Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, this is like
and it was more adult. It had like Mortal Kombat. It had like Mobile Suit Gundam game, like really cool Gundam games, like really cool stuff. Like, so that was like the cool area, you know? And as I got older, I wanted to go up there more and more, but that's where all the older kids hung out.
Yeah,
and so,
it wasn't like an arcade for adults yet, right? Because like adults,
it was like for teenagers. It was it was for teenagers more than anything, and it was the gory games, the violent games, like that was upstairs in this.
For the kids who were too old to come hang out with their sibling.
I was playing skee ball, but if you wanted to play Mortal Kombat, you go up to the top of it. So that's where I like have this feeling of like it being like a cool hip thing, you know. And it was still like people were playing like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and like doing the thing where you put like a quarter on the machine and like challenging each other. And that to me was like in my time alive is the golden age of like arcades, when you would have like people playing games and actually trying to like compete with each other in these arcades. But I feel like I was on the tail end of that, very much the tail end of that. That is gone now. So I thought it would be good for us to talk about the two different kinds of arcades we have there's three, but there's two different kinds we're going to talk about today in 2023.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, there's your Dave & Buster's Chuck E. Cheese-esque style gambling for children. There's that. And
Dave
then
a little bit more adult, but
Dave & Buster's a little more adult.
Right?
They let kids in until like 10 o'clock at night and then become 21 plus. And then there's the barcade scene, which is funny because that name is actually trademarked. You can't call yourself a barcade. There's a barcade in New York called Barcade, and they like trademarked the name. And then, but that's like the style where it's like for adults, classic retro games, newer stuff too. Not really tickets, more of like a hangout kind of style place.
Yeah.
And then the third one that we're not really going to get into, but I feel like is a thing because of the internet, is like the home arcade scene where people are buying old arcade machines and making little arcades in their homes, which I think is a cool idea, but it's like not really relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that in public. So I guess to start this, where do you want to go first? Barcade, or do you want to go to the Dave & Buster's Chuck E. Cheese route? How do you feel?
I kind of want to talk about like what the motivations for going to an arcade today versus back in the day, right? Like, because back in the day, going to an arcade was like a social thing because online wasn't a thing. Also, the games were generally better, or at least like higher production quality, right? Like
than what you could get at home.
Yeah. That used to be like a selling point of home consoles, was like, this is like having an arcade in your living room, which doesn't make any sense now. People are like, that doesn't mean anything to me. But back in those days, like Mortal Kombat in the arcade was like objectively better than Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis or the Super Nintendo, right? So you would go to the arcade to like play the cooler version of the game that you could like practice at home on the worst version. Worst version.
Yeah. Do you think the people that like bought the arcade button pads for their like system so they could practice to go to the arcade and beat people? I would hope so.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so. And that's a big part of like the fighting game scene too, is like you can play fighting games online now, of course, and it's like match made, and you can play the game against another human, which is fun. But there's like something about the ambiance of like crowding around a machine and getting to stay there if you're winning, and then like you said, like putting the quarters on to like call next, right? Like that was like that's a thing that just sort of really hasn't been replicated yet
Mhm.
today in the online space, which I think is really interesting. And that's like one cool thing about arcades that that I can admit, I guess, but I just don't have the nostalgia for it. So
Doesn't do
anyway,
it for you. I know.
yeah.
It's
But talk about like Dave and Buster's Chuck E. Cheese thing. Like what's that versus the other type?
so that type we're going to talk that's the I'm saying gambling for children. It's the ticket model. It's the model where you are going, and when I was a kid, you used to go and you would play the game and it would print out physical paper tickets that you would rip off, and then you'd have these like long strands of tickets. Some people like throw them in a bag, they'd like weigh them or
Yeah. You have
whatever.
to weigh them to count them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so that was like the style, and Dave and Buster's took that model and ran with it and modernized it. So, now if I feel like a lot of our listeners have probably been to an arcade like Dave and Buster's, or because local mom and pop arcades use the same system as Dave and Buster's now, where you have a card and
Hmm.
you scan it. And then when you finish the game, it tells you how many tickets it puts on your card. It's all digital. Then you go to the little shop and you get your prizes or whatever. But um, I think that the thing that Dave and Buster's did that revolutionized it is they made it so it was like, no, this is a adult hangout place. This is
Yeah.
it kind of is on the border of the Chuck E. Cheese and the barcade because it's both technically. It's doing both.
Yeah, and especially when you talk about, like, before the 10 PM thing of, like, when, when they kick the kids out, I guess, is, like, it basically just is Chuck E. Cheese, although I think the games are not quite so kid-focused the way the Chuck E. Cheese games are.
No, they're not. And I went. The reason we're kind of talking about this is you went to a barcade recently,
Yeah.
and I actually went to Dave and Buster's after a comedy show a couple nights ago, and it's funny because the games at Dave and Buster's are children's games, but when you consume alcohol, they become very fun and silly. Like I played a giant version of Hungry Hungry Hippos where you had this like lever, and I'm doing this at the camera, but you'd like push forward to move the hippo's mouth forward and grab, and you'd pull it back to grab the marbles, right?
Yeah.
And it's essentially a rowing machine, is what I learned. And you're like playing that 4 player, and it's really fun. And I'm like, this is definitely a game that's meant for kids. But when you're an adult and you combine alcohol in the mix, it becomes a very fun, silly party game. So they kind of have this way of like vibing it with that, and making it gel, which
Yeah,
worked
I
really
wouldn't
well
even
with me.
call that, like, a video game too. This is
It
just, like,
wasn't
an
a video. This was
amusement center.
electromechanical. It was entirely like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just designed to make it so that you are moving and doing something silly, which is also what Dave and Buster's does. It's not video game centric necessarily. This
Yeah.
thing, today's episode, like, because I would argue like the reason you play an arcade game now is for the controller types. Like the gun games have guns that you hold. And
Yeah.
they're actually like, I mean, I played an Alien game on Friday where you have to like hit the magazine at the bottom of it to
Oh, to
reload
reload?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of like shooting off screen like I'm used to. It was really, it was kind of intense. It was a lot.
Yeah, you can have these, like, specialized controllers that are just for that game that don't make sense. Like, we all lived through the Plastic Instrument era.
Oh yeah.
I don't want, like, 8 different guns at home so that I can play Halo Fireteam Raven, but I will go to an arcade.
You have to like actually physically switch the guns controller every time you want to switch guns if you play it at home. It's so annoying.
You gotta get out your needler and you
Oh yeah. We're gonna talk about Halo Fireteam Raven because that's probably my favorite arcade game right now. I love it so much. And I told
there you
everyone
go.
about it and I talked it up and we all played it and it was super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a cool guy, everybody. That's what I'm trying to convince. Okay. So yeah, Dave and Buster's also the big thing for me about them that they've done, and I'm calling this like it's pretty obvious, like in looking at it like, oh, that's genius what they've done. They've taken phone games and converted them into ticket games.
Oh yeah.
So now you play like Flappy tickets. Flappy Bird, Flappy tickets. The longer you go, the more tickets you earn. When you
Yep.
die, you get your tickets. Crossy Road, which is just Frogger. That's just
Yep.
Frogger. And then there's also Fruit Ninja.
I've played the Fruit Ninja. That's really
Mm-hmm.
fun. Doodle Jump as well is like
Doodle
they just
Jump
have
is
like a really
also.
big version of Doodle Jump. Remember Doodle Jump? Gosh.
Doodle Jump was such a fun game when that came out. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
I mean, sure, it still exists. I'm sure I can just download it and play it.
Oh yeah, you can probably. I think that might be one of the Apple Arcade ones.
Oh, probably.
It might be on Apple Arcade.
I love Doodle Jump, man. I played a lot of Doodle Jump back in the early days of smartphones.
It wouldn't be an episode of Codex if we didn't mention Apple Arcade. So that's important. So I mean, that's kind of something that really threw me off as I was walking through it on my own on Friday. And it really was like every other machine was like a cell phone game converted to the point where they had a card battler, like a Marvel Snap-esque game, not Marvel Snap, but kind of like Marvel Snap, where you would play cards on this arcade machine to win ticket. I was very surprised. It might have been called like Tournament of Champions, like Marvel Tournament of Champions.
Oh yeah, that's a mobile game you can play, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it said it was on iOS
like
and Android.
PvP thing.
Yeah, so they have that there too at Dave and Buster's, which was surprising to me. But
yeah, I think another interesting like difference between the barcade stuff that we'll get into later and Dave and Buster's is Dave and Buster's is usually centered around having newer things. Like, okay, they'll have like a retro corner where there might have some old like a Pac-Man machine or something, but it's really like a novelty. There goes my light. Wow, it really didn't last that long at all. This time.
It didn't. But you know what?
It's like a novelty
now.
What?
It's mood lighting now.
Yeah. But like the retro corner is like just this like just a thing that's just there so they could say they have some retro games and like, oh, I remember Pac-Man. I'll go play Pac-Man, right? But most of the arcade games and the ones they want you to play are like newer things, like Halo Fireteam Raven. I mean, that's a few years old now, but it's like a newer game, right? It's not meant to be this like classic Halo nostalgia game, right?
Yeah, Star Wars Battle Pod. That's like a big one too. But they got rid of the pod, the one that they had at the Dave and Buster's I went to. I'll just call it out. Auburn, Washington, Super Mall was where it was. They had the battle. They were called battle pods, but it was just a screen you stand in front of. It wasn't a pod anymore. The thing they do with the old games, which is kind of funny, is they blow them up now. So you play giant Pac-Man or giant Centipede or giant Space Invaders. That's how they've made it more like Dave and Buster's-y, I guess is how you could say. They blow it up to make it so different. But
and
they
the
don't
older
really
ones
have.
usually don't. I don't know if they retrofit them to take the card swipe because you don't carry coins around at Dave and Buster's anymore.
No, but I looked all over at Dave and Buster's and I didn't find
Maybe
any retro games like that. There was no traditional Donkey Kong machine, or it was like they have the 4-player Pac-Man, where you sit down, which is really fun. The 4-player Pac-Man is really fun, but it just didn't. They kind of ditched that part of it for these newer versions of the older games.
Yeah.
So they're like, why would you want to play an old version when we have giant Space Invaders? And
that makes sense to me now, especially with like, if you want to play old Pac-Man, like you can find a place that has old Pac-Man, and Dave and Buster's is like, we're not here to satisfy your nostalgia urges for the original game. We will take advantage of your nostalgia urges to make you play this other game that's like more addictive.
One of the coolest arcades I actually went to recently, I was up north Washington near Mount Vernon. It was in Mount Vernon. And it's an arcade store. A comic book game shop. And in the back, they just had an arcade in their like area. It was like where they keep all the spare inventory on one side, and then an arcade on the other side. And I like that because that was just quarters. Everything cost a quarter, and you just play a game. That's the whole point of it. You just play a game. That's the entire point.
In Richland has like a liting tiny arcade area in the back.
Yeah. Gosh, I should look up that area in Mount Vernon. I feel like I should call them out because they were so nice and so cool. I'm gonna look it up. Right now. But what about
I was gonna say I'll shout out Sunken Treasures all day long. If you're in the southeastern Washington state area,
and they also are a great store in general.
Yeah, they got a whole bunch of old games. Like it's just like a great tiny little mom and pop, awesome store. Love them.
It's called Docking Bay 93. How did I not remember that? It's called Docking Bay 93. Yeah, and it's a really cool shop, and it's got like this arcade in the back. The reason I liked it is they really were like pinball costs 50 cents, but every other arcade game costs 25 cents.
Nice.
So they're kind of keeping that alive, which was kind of neat.
Yeah. That kind of rolls nicely into talking about like the barcade scene
Mhm.
more so than Dave and Buster's, because I feel like Dave and Buster's is there to get you to play the games because that's how they make money, is when you play their games and like get the tickets and prizes and stuff. Barcades, generally speaking, to me, it seems like that the arcade portion of it is more ambiance and like mood setting, rather than like let's go to the one up in Sherman Oaks and play Pac-Man together. Like, sure, people are standing at the machine and they're playing it. Like, it's not like the machines just sit there vacant. Although sometimes I've been to arcades where the machines just sit there vacant.
Yeah.
Um, but it's more of a like, we're having a burger and a beer at this bar, and like the overall like just aesthetic ambiance is this sort of like retro game thing, and like part of that is that you can go play a real arcade if you want. But that's not like the point of the bar, right?
Yeah. Ground control in Portland's like that, but ground control I think there's enough of a market for it in Portland where people are going there to play these games. For example, Dance Dance Revolution at Ground Control is impossible to get on
Oh
like
yeah.
on like a Friday night because everyone wants to play. They're going to this bar to play Dance Dance Revolution.
Yeah, well, and Dance Dance Revolution is a better experience in arcades, unless you
Hmm.
have like the whole setup at home, which people don't like. You can get a crappy dance mat to put on your floor to like practice at home, right? But like, there's something about DDR, like the big machine with like the metal pads, that was pretty expensive to get a setup at your own home. Not to mention all the space it takes up. That like going to the arcade and paying to play there is a better experience. Plus, you get the head-to-head thing, kind of like with fighting games too, because DDR is PvP. If you didn't know, DDR is very PvP.
DVR, DDR, the original battle royale.
Yeah,
No,
and so I think it has, like, a similar scene to, like, fighting games,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, it was I was there for my bachelor party and we were like, we should jokingly play DDR because we're all old and bad at this. And I was like, there's no way we're getting on. There's a line to get on
Yeah, and
DDR
all the
right
people
now.
playing are actually good, and, like, when they see you get on
Very
there, like,
good.
just messing around and, like, falling over and just having fun, they're like, "These jokers are not
Why are they
serious.
here? What are they doing here? Why are
They're
these
not serious
uncool
DDR
old
players."
guys here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, we're all waiting in line so that we can practice.
They got sweatbands on, they're ready to go.
Yeah,
I'm just sitting here like, what do I want to dance to?
yeah, like, yeah. What?
Yeah.
I don't know any of these
So
songs.
in that sense, a barcade does have like a community. And I mean, we've talked about this. You have a friend who's a professional big buck hunter player,
That's true.
potential
I
future
I
guest.
would love to get her on the
Yeah.
podcast at some point to talk about Big Buck Hunter, because she's very good at it.
Yeah, and there's like that's a game that would have like a scene at these kind of bars too. Where
Yeah.
it's like
Oh, I'm sure
or
she
like
could
Golden
illuminate that.
Tea.
Yeah,
Golden Tea
Golden
is very
Tee.
much like that as well. So in that sense, the barcade can like niche that, like grab that market. But most of the time, I agree, it's like very much casual,
Yeah.
chill. We're just drinking in this environment that feels very 80s retro.
Yeah, it's like it gives us some nostalgia for those days where we would actually go and have fun and play games. Now we just kinda wanna hang out in the area. And in those places, I think a lot of times they'll have all the arcades set to free play, right? Where it's just like,
Hmm.
we just want you in the building, maybe play a game for the novelty of it. It's free, so, like, there's no friction here, right? You don't even have to have a quarter or anything like that, because that's a whole thing nowadays. People don't carry cash. Um but it gets people in, and then once they're in, it's like, "Oh, you wanna have a burger? You wanna have a beer?" Right? Like, that sort of like, it's just like the attraction thing. But the barcade that I went to the other night had a lot of people in it, a lot of people playing games, and they were able to charge on their machines, like, 25 cents, because they had a little change making thing. They had a
Oh
whole area for
wow.
pinball, so maybe if your bar is popular enough, you end up charging.
Ground
Yeah.
control charges.
Yeah, okay, well,
Ground control uses a card, like a Dave and Buster's esque game card, but there's no tickets. You just use the
oh.
card to
Do they
play
have,
games.
like, older retro games that are retrofitted to
They
take the
do.
card? Okay.
Yeah, they have so like they've expanded since I was there when I was in, when I went there in like 2014. They were just like one room and they had
Mhm.
like pinball up top and then the room. And now they bought the other half of the building. So it like wraps around and there's like like more games in the retro pinball area. But the DDR's up by that area. Like so it's kind of hard to get there and find it. But it was extremely popular the night of, but it's kind of the bar. It felt like the bar you go to, but you don't stay there. That's
Mm.
kind of what it felt like. I'm like, we go because we went to there. with the idea of like we're going to be here all night, and we're there for a couple hours, but then we were all like, ah, we're ready to move on, like afterward,
Yeah.
because it does feel like you are drinking and you're hanging out there, but then at a certain point you run out of game credits, and you're like, if I want to stay at this bar and play games, I'm gonna have to pay like $40 more.
Yeah. Well, and they structure it in such a way
Yeah,
so it's like you can't just like load $1 on your card to go play 2
yeah.
more games, right? You gotta load $20 and now you're here
Hmm.
for 2 more hours.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and
And now you gotta get another drink, and now you
I
gotta get another thing of fries, and
yeah, I kind of wish it was free now that you mentioned it, because that would have actually enticed me to stay longer, because I wouldn't have felt obligated. But because I had to like pay more money, we decided to move on to another bar after that.
yeah.
So this was
I
my bachelor party weekend. So that's what I have distinct memories of being like, oh, we're leaving to a different place now, even though I thought we would be there all night. I was wrong.
Alright, yeah. I think if I were to ever run a barcade, I would probably do it in the free play style of, like, get people in. Like, I wouldn't want these newer games, like, it wouldn't be, "Let's go play the newest Halo Fireteam Raven." It would be, like it would be for ambiance, right? I'd have some
Yeah.
pinball machines. I'd have a fun time myself just, like, maintaining the arcade machines. I don't even care if nobody plays them,
Oh
you know?
yeah. That's to me is like the coolest part about arcades is like you have to take care of these machines and care about them.
Yeah.
And like that's the nerdy part of my brain that would be into that if I owned a barcade, would be
Yeah.
like tinkering with the machines and making sure they're all good to go, and like getting new machines and selling old ones and repairing them. Because I watch a lot of arcade. That's my TikTok, is arcade TikTok. I love it, and I like watching that stuff. I sound like it's such an old man when I say that, but I love that. And that's the cool part to me about it, is how do you fix these old things
Yeah.
that are outdated, and you have to make parts for them, and it's like a whole thing.
Yeah, and sometimes the parts aren't available anymore. There's also like the never-ending struggle between like when do I try to keep things as original as I can, or do I upgrade certain things because it makes my life easier? Like the at the barcade that I went to the other night, I noticed that all of the machines had old like CRTs in them still. And
Oh
that's sometimes you
wow.
don't see that. Sometimes you go to a barcade, especially one that's really, really well maintained, they will have actually replaced those LCD or those CRTs with LCDs for the games that works for. So like light gun games, generally that doesn't work for it. Um, but like most games, you could feasibly do that, and like the picture quality is like technically better, and it's a lot easier to maintain. If it breaks, like LCDs are cheaper than CRTs now, like all that kind of stuff. So it does like take away a little bit from the authenticity of it, especially for games that are more 2D that were designed to be played on CRTs. Like you kind of lose a little bit there with all the sharp pixels and stuff that you get from an LCD. And then there's like probably a whole nother world of like people who put LCDs in, but then they also have like filters on the LCDs. Like it goes through a machine that like puts a CRT. There's a lot
Do
of stuff you
people
can do.
has someone taken the market of trying to manufacture new CRTs?
That's a
Is that
good question. I don't know.
because it seems like there's been such a demand that someone might have
Do you think
tried
there'd
it?
be like a niche
Yeah,
people
like a
make like
very niche thing.
making
But again, I don't know how you if manufacturing like cathode ray tube TVs is probably insane to do in like
yeah.
2023. Like I just remember when COVID was hitting, and granted, video game prices are crashing. Retro game prices right now are falling. Like it's very apparent. The CRT prices were escalated too at that
Yeah.
time. And I think those are kind of also teetering off. But at that moment, I was like, why is no one making CRTs? I feel like it would be a market. If you just made a CRT like one size, this is the
Yeah.
for people that want to play retro games, you might actually end up getting people interested in that.
Yeah, because you could build in a lot of you could make it like I don't know if 4K CRT equipment exists, but you could make it like sort of more modern in that sense and have like really, really high quality upscaling things like all those things that you can buy now to hook your old consoles into your
Mm-hmm.
new TV that like does the upscaling and like will put filters over it and like will do all this kind of stuff. Like you could build a CRT with that stuff like built in, right? I
Mm-hmm.
guess you wouldn't need a CRT filter if you're using
Yeah.
an actual
I have a
CRT.
I'm looking at my CRT I have in my room right now, and it is it's the old kind with a VCR in it, but it doesn't have component in the back. It doesn't have the
Yeah.
yellow, white, red. It's only the cable screw
Oh,
in, and the picture quality on it's
that's
awful.
yeah,
It's
awful.
terrible when I plug my 64 in there. It looks terrible. I to the point where I'm like, I used to play games like this. Like
Yeah.
it's so bad. It just looks so fuzzy and muffled. Everything looks muffled and
Yeah,
yeah.
if you hook in things with a composite cable, I mean, I know you can't on that TV, but like most CRTs have that. That's like a big upgrade. S video is a big upgrade too. And then if you're like really high end, you've got like a component TV with like the red, yellow, or red, green, blue plugins. I
My
had an
T
old CRT. I had the Sony Trinitron, the 37-inch widescreen 1080i. It was our family TV for a while, and then we got a new TV, and we ended up having to figure out a way to get rid of it. It weighed like 500 pounds. That's not
Oh
even an
gosh,
exaggeration. It
yeah.
was so heavy. Like I wish we still had it, but I don't know where my parents would have stored it, and I don't have a place for it myself. But man, I wish I still had it.
My flat screen is an old in the living room at my house here, and it has the components in the back. And I told my wife, I'm like, we're not getting rid of this television. When we upgrade, that's fine, but we're not getting rid of this TV. We're going
We're
to keep
keeping
this
this one
TV.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess for barcades, it's a chiller hangout space, and then for Chuck E. Cheese style Dave and Buster's ticketing, I'm a torn, I guess, with this because I don't like I am against this business model because it is gambling, right? It feels like you can debate as much as you want, but you're kind of taking kids' money for tickets, and then it's weird. I think
There's a
there's a
weird
moral
line.
gray area there. I think everyone can agree on that, regardless if you're fine with it or not. It's there,
Yeah.
but that is what's keeping arcades afloat. Like that business model is what's making it so there's still arcades out there.
Yeah.
So I guess in a way I'm kind of torn about this because I want arcades to exist, but in the end it's this morally gray thing where you're doing the whole ticket business model thing. So like, it's so funny how much internet stuff there is about people trying to like rig the system so they end up getting PlayStation 5s from Chuck E. Cheese or Dave and Buster's and
Yeah. For a
actually
quarter.
making
Yeah.
yeah, it's just such a funny thing where I'm like, no, it's all a sham. Most of these games are designed in the style of Vegas where they will not pay out unless they've had a certain amount of money put into them. Like that's how
Yeah.
they're designed.
If you got a PlayStation 5 at one of these things with your tickets, you definitely spent more than $500
Hmm.
in playing those games. Like they're not giving this stuff away.
No, they're not. And as an arcade guy, there's actually an arcade tech that has a TikTok channel, and he shows you, he's like, this is the thing. This is the number where it's set to for it to pay out a certain number. You have to wait this. It was a claw carrying game where he's like, it will only
Oh
like
yeah.
it will only make the claw actually able to grab something after this much money has been put into it.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure,
Hmm.
a thing, like, because yeah, those claw machine games, like, yeah, you can maybe win the thing by putting in a quarter and getting something that's worth $20, but the amount of quarters that have been put in before you, where it was literally impossible for somebody to win that, like, people say, "Oh, it's a game of skill." It's like, mm,
Mm-mm.
not
Not
really. I mean, maybe once you've passed the threshold, maybe that game of skill, like, is there because, you can't grab nothing and you get something, but, before that threshold is passed, you can't do it.
Yeah, the Cyclone game is the same way. The one with that circle of ring, that circle
Yeah.
of lights that goes around. You have to hit the button to land it in the middle.
Oh, yeah, because it
That
goes so fast, yeah.
it won't pay out until like it'll purposefully move the light over one or two or three. It'll
Yeah,
do that until you had a certain number of plays in it
yeah.
to make it work. That's why it's like hard for me because I understand that people need to make money and that's like capitalism or whatever. But I lean more towards the barcade style because at least then you're getting entertainment out of it and not
Mhm,
just trying to win something. Like there's something to me about going to an arcade to play a game because I think it's fun, and
mhm.
that's kind of gone in a lot of those places. Like it's not about fun anymore. It's about winning
Winning the prizes,
tickets.
and
Yeah.
that's especially apparent. This is a little bonus, like, type of arcade, I guess we can talk about, but I went to Tokyo a few months ago, and there are arcades everywhere, and it's almost 100% like claw machines and things like that, where it's just like put money in and hope to get a prize out of it, which I thought was really, and they're just everywhere in Tokyo, like, just all over the place, like, on every street corner, there's either a gotcha machine, which is just put a quarter in and get a little capsule. We have those in America too, but not to the scale that they do in Japan. But then there's just like huge arcade rooms that are just full of claw machines and things like claw machines that thought that was so interesting. Like, not that we don't
Hmm.
have those in the United States, but just the sheer prevalence of them was
Yeah. It's just all
incredible.
prizes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, isn't that a thing? I know a lot of countries and states you can get around gambling laws by making it prize based.
Maybe because then you can say it's a game of skill, right? And
Yeah,
it's not
it's
actually
like
gambling if it's a game of
yeah.
skill.
When we
Yeah.
talked about this with like pinball, when pinball was gambling, right? And the
Yeah.
way they would get around with it is you'd win a prize or something. And I think actually in Japan for because we talked about pachinko and how
Mhm.
popular that is. It is gambling, but it's for prizes, and then there's some other shops that you can take the prizes and get money instead. It's like a weird
Yeah.
thing
It's
you
like a
can like
loophole.
loophole you can get around to do that. So,
Yeah, where it's
but
like, "Oh, you got this plastic little dinosaur," and then it's like that nobody actually wants this little dinosaur, but the shop down the corner, they really want it, and they'll give you $100 for it, right? It's like,
yeah,
"Okay."
I wanted to do an episode on this because there was, and this is probably from 2014, 2015. So it is history now. There was a brief stint in the US, and this is still prevalent in other countries. Do you know those games at they're actually at Dave and Buster's, the ones that are like flat screens that look like an ocean floor and you're like fishing? Have you seen those?
No.
Those games in 2014 and like 2015, there was like a gambling mini uh crazy time where those games were being played in background like underground casinos in the US for money
Oh.
because you can set them to play for money like that
Oh.
they're because they're actually designed as gambling machines
Oh,
and
interesting.
they were people getting busted by the police
Dave and
and
Busted?
they got Dave and busted and they because they were playing these games for money and instead of for the prizes that they're played for at like Dave and Buster's.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about that. It was just such a small story. I went down a rabbit hole one day where I was like, this is crazy, but it just like maybe I'll do it in the future, but it's just not enough there for it. But they're the kind of games where you like catch fish on this top down ocean floor. And if you catch a fish, it's worth a certain amount of points and you get a certain amount of money.
Hmm.
But it is also gambling because you will not catch certain fish after a certain period of time unless a certain amount of money has been put in. Like it's very
Yeah.
much a gambling machine. So I just thought that was interesting that we had a mini crisis in America over a electronic fishing game in like 2014, 2015.
Dang, I wanna you should send me that article. I would love to.
Yeah, I think it was a Vice article that was.
Okay.
I have
That
it
sounds like
bookmarked. I'll send it to you. But yeah, it was. It's just such a funny thing that the things people do for gambling. But I think we should move on though to talk about our favorite kind of games
okay.
at these arcades. Like, what are our favorite games? And I think we're gonna start with the one that you and I both love, and it's Halo Fireteam Raven.
I do love that game. I just kept dropping money into that at Dave& Buster's until I finished it,
It's
and it's
got
probably like
cutscenes.
45 minutes long.
It's got cutscenes in it
Yeah.
though. That's
Got a
the
whole
crazy
Halo
part. It's a
thing.
story. It's like you're playing an actual video game, but for money at an arcade. I loved it.
Yeah.
Does
I
the
wonder how
AI
much money I
Wesley?
spent on it. I don't remember.
I thought about going there one day and just playing I had to get 3 friends and being like, "We're committing to this. Like, we
Yeah.
have to commit to it." Because I've never actually beaten it all the way through. I've played multiple different parts of it. But I am curious how much money it probably costs you to beat the full game. It's gotta be like 20 or $30.
Yeah, per person probably. Like, I
Mhm.
wanna say I went there for a work thing, so work had, like, given us cards, so I was, like, oblivious to the value of whatever the points were on the cards. I was just like, "Whatever, keep swiping it because 'cause I'm not cashing this out at the end of the night."
Yeah.
So we just kept going, but I honestly wouldn't know how much money we
Was there
spent
a
on it.
final boss in the end of it?
I think so.
Do you roll
This was, like, 6
credits?
or 7 years ago now that I did
I
this.
might just have to watch a playthrough of it, honestly.
Yeah,
I
that's
think I'm
the
just gonna
thing.
watch a YouTube playthrough of it because I just wanna know what the game is, and I don't wanna spend the money, but I'm curious to see what the boss fight's like.
Yeah.
But that's one of my favorites. Halo that it probably is the game that every time I go to Dave& and Buster's, I play Fireteam Raven. And I tell people that haven't played it, I'm like, "Get ready," because it's kind of like a fun ride. It's like a ride. It
Yeah,
feels like
yeah,
you're
it
playing
is.
a ride. It's
Yeah,
really
it's fun.
it's cool. And whenever you get like unlimited rocket launchers, that's when it's really fun. So
Yeah. For me, the games that I loved when I was younger were always the arcade versions of the home console games. So like games like the Cruisin' series, Cruisin' USA,
oh
Cruisin' World.
yeah.
Those the arcade was actually better than the Nintendo 64 version. So like that
Mhm.
was cool. Like the novelty of being able to play like a better version of the game was really fun. I also love the newer Mario Kart,
It's
Mario
so
Kart
fun. The
GP or something.
yeah, where you sit in the cart
Yeah,
and
and
stuff. It's
it's a
super fun.
totally different like new Mario Kart game. It's not just like, "Ah, we took Mario Kart Double Dash and like made it in an arcade form." It's like, no, this is like a whole new game with a whole new tracks. And some of those tracks are in Mario Kart 8 now on Switch. I think.
Yeah.
Like, because they keep adding tracks to that game. That game's huge now.
That game's been going for years. It makes sense though. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's isn't broke, don't fix it. Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
just let
kind
it
of
go.
what they said too. They're like, we feel like we perfected the Mario Kart formula here. We don't really need to sell a new game, but we'll keep putting out tracks and characters and stuff for the old one. And
Which is
that game
great.
was kind of built around having a lot of cosmetics too, so they can sort of add that stuff in as well.
I don't have that for Switch still, which I feel like is a
Oh,
mistake.
it's worth
Because I
picking up.
love Mario Kart. I just love
Yeah.
Mario Kart. I like
That
playing
game's
it alone.
that game's like 10 years old now because I had it on Wii U.
Oh yeah. But yeah, that's a good one. Mario Kart's a solid one. And the racing game theme, one of my favorites is Hydro Thunder.
Ooh, Hydro Thunder. Another one I think had better graphics at the arcade.
Yeah, and it also was like it's one of those games where I played it. This actually happened during my bachelor party when I played it because I was very much of the mindset like, oh, I'll play Hydro Thunder. It's been years. And we ended up having more fun on that than like any of the other games. Like we kept switching places and racing and stuff. And it was really fun. And it's got that control throttle like a boat does,
Yeah,
like an
yeah.
actual. So it was kind of fun to do. And the levels were ridiculous. It's got that classic level of ridiculous racing game with weird tracks that just really hits for me. And
Yeah,
I love Hydro Thunder for that reason. And you can't emulate that at home. That experience you have to have in an arcade with a controller and
with the
everything.
controller and stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
because I say I think you can technically emulate it at home, but you're not going to have the controller.
You're not gonna have fun, yeah. Unless you
You're
buy
not
yourself
gonna have fun.
unless you have a you're not gonna have a good time unless you buy yourself you build a off aftermarket hydro racing boat simulator in your home.
I wouldn't put it past people.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Well, you already said Mario Kart. What's this one here that you wrote that the Super Mario one? What is that?
Oh, versus Super Mario. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we've talked about this on the podcast before because I always mention how the Silverwood theme park in Idaho
That I've never been to.
You've still never been to. That's
Never been. We've talked about this. Yeah, that comes up. We should go. We should do it. When next time you're up here, we should go.
We'll go to Silverwood, dude. It's fun. It's like it's the closest thing to Disneyland that I had ever been to before actual Disneyland when I was like 24.
I love this. I'm ready to do it.
So,
I never went in college. Everyone went in college, but me, I never went.
Yeah, but they used to have a arcade machine there. There was the Versus arcade machine that had, I think it was Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. It was like a multiplayer version of Super Mario Brothers where you each had your own TV. You were like sort of, it was PvP Super Mario Brothers, but not the old timey like Mario Brothers game, with the pipes and stuff. This was Super Mario Brothers with 8 worlds of levels for you to play against each other.
Was it like based on Super Mario Brothers 3?
No,
or what?
The original Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, the original for NES. Okay.
Yeah. That was cool. Like just the novelty of like, oh, this home game that is designed for home in the arcade, and it's a little bit different. And it's a little bit harder too because they're trying to get your quarters, So
and you
cool.
can't screen watch.
I have. What?
You can't screen watch because it's 2 separate screens. There's no screen. You remember screen looking? That was a big issue. When you played video games as a kid.
Yeah, but that's just a memory that I have. I don't remember that game being particularly good. I just thought it was cool.
Hey,
and that would have been in that I saw it maybe the late 90s, so that would have been like kind of past its prime in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, that's a really cool. Yeah, I like it when they take a game and, like you said, slightly change it to make it unique for the arcade. That's what makes it fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I'm actually going to say one of my favorite games that I will always play in an arcade if I have enough people with me is the 4-player Pac-Man.
Oh yeah,
where you're top down and then you become a bigger Pac-Man and you can eat other people, but you can still die from the ghosts too. So there's like that there. And then when you eat the pellets and the pellets go away, they respawn and it like randomizes the board. So it kind of like keeps you on your toes. And that game is also long. It's way longer. We were playing it at that Docking Bay 93 and we were playing it for a good 10 minutes with our quarter play.
That's a long run.
It was a while we were playing that game. Felt good because you get money out of it,
Yeah.
So that's the one that I have here. I mentioned DDR. Are you a big DDR guy, Tyler?
For like one summer in high school, I played a lot of DDR at home. Had a lot of fun with that, but not anymore.
Not anymore.
And I tried to play it in arcades, but the pad was different. I was probably making up excuses for why I was bad in the arcade. And I was like, oh, this metal pad is different. It's not like I don't like this. I should try again. But yeah,
we could do it. We could try to become the best DDRs that ever lived in our 30s.
That's true. We could try.
Is there an over 30s league for Dungeons and Dragons, for Dungeons and Dance Revolution? Is there an over 30-year-old league?
Probably.
I'm bad at DDR. I remember being on a ship when I was 18 years old and I was in Europe, and it's the ferry that takes you from England to France.
Oh,
And they had a DDR machine on there, and there were kids that were like really good playing on it.
yeah. It takes a lot of practice. Like, I
It
don't think
is
people don't just hop on DDR and like have a natural talent where they just crush it immediately. Like, it takes a lot of practice to get somewhat good at it.
a lot of time, a lot
Yeah.
of focus put into it. You got to care, which I like. I like that you're rewarded for putting time into something in a video game, and you get it like you would at home.
Yeah.
Like being good at any other game.
The thing that just kind of sucks about DDR is that, like, if you've never played it before, like, playing at an arcade is, like, not a good idea. Because
Yeah,
you're just it's one of those games that, like, some games you can be bad at, and it's funny when you're bad at it. I feel like games like Guitar Hero or, like, rhythm games or, like DDR, like, when you're bad at it, it's just not that fun.
I would agree
Even
with
if you're
that.
playing on lower difficulties, like, it's just not very fun when you're bad at it, and so there's, like, a barrier to entry that I think makes it surprising to me that it has had such longevity, I guess.
Yeah, I get mad because I'm bad. That's what
Yeah,
happens to me. I'm mad because I'm
bad
bad.
is bad.
You mentioned Guitar Hero. How do you feel about the Guitar Hero arcade game?
I
Are
don't
you
like it
for?
because
Ooh, because
there's
you love Guitar Hero. We should
I do
mention
love
that.
Guitar Hero. Half the reason to play Guitar Hero is the music in it, right? Like DDR, the music is part of it, and like that's like the stepping is like the bigger thing. I'd say it's like 75% doing the moves and then like 25% the music for me anyway. But with Guitar Hero, you could almost flip that around or at least make it 50-50, where it's like the song is important to the thing. And like the reason I'm enjoying this is because I love the song, not because I like pushing buttons on a plastic guitar, right? That's sort of part of it, but like that's that's not the biggest reason. And so in an arcade where every game is fighting for your attention with flashing lights and they're all really loud, you get this Guitar Hero arcade that you can't even hear it. Like depending on how the arcade operator has like turned things up too, you may not be able to hear the music at all. And then we're just staring at a screen pushing buttons on a plastic guitar and we can't even hear the music to like keep up with the rhythm because that's part of it too. Like you even if you don't like the music, you need to hear it to like play, right? Or at
Mhm.
least it helps. And so I'm just like, if you can't hear the music, that's a
What's
big part
even the
of
point? You should
what's
have
even the point, right?
headphones.
You can't hear the music, which is half of it for me anyway, and then you're gonna be bad at playing the actual game because you can't hear the music.
Yeah, and actually, you can't have headphones because multiple strangers wearing headphones would be gross. Actually,
Yeah,
every time
that's
that'd be
yeah,
disgusting. That's a
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
You just gotta
And
crank that volume and hope for the best. I
yeah,
don't know.
and then if you crank the volume on it, then you're ruining everybody else around you. Like it needs to be really
Mhm.
loud for it to be fun. So
So
unless you
you
want
heard
to
it
make
here
Guitar
first,
Hero like the
folks.
focal point of your arcade, which you could do, I guess you could build an arcade around that where you just crank it
Or
up and be like, okay, when you're playing Guitar Hero, you're up on stage. That could be really
oh,
fun.
oh yeah, or you have a special soundproof room for Guitar Hero Arcade, like a little side room,
Yeah,
that you walk
you could do
into.
it that way too, like a karaoke room for
Yeah,
you and your friends. Yeah, you could do that, I suppose. Um,
it would be cool if you had an arcade actually, and a room on the side was a full rock band setup
oh yeah,
where you're
I
like,
would
this
want to
is
put that up on a stage and like be like, okay, you're playing for the arcade.
you're playing for the whole arcade. That's funny. Or if
Yeah.
you have them in the room so they can hear themselves, and then you have a screen in the
Oh, there
arcade.
you go.
Yeah, we're really crushing it. We
Yeah.
know we could get that.
That could be fun because that's one of the most fun that I've had playing Rock Band was the very first time I ever played Rock Band, which was at PAX 2007 before the game was out. I played it and they had like a stage set up and everybody was bad because nobody had played Rock Band except for the people who knew how to play guitar for Guitar Hero.
Mhm.
But like drums, everybody was bad because nobody had ever played drums in Rock Band before. Um, that was a lot of fun. And then when Rock Band 4 came out, so this must have been like PAX 2015, which I think was the last time I went to PAX. They had a huge stage set up again because I think the big thing about Rock Band 4 was this like sort of like online PvP mode that you could like play against other people with your band. And so they had like a battle of the bands set up at PAX. And I played that with a good friend of mine, and that was so much fun. And like, yeah, that was really fun because there was like a crowd there, and like I don't know, that's the sort of thing I enjoy. So
We got to emulate it. We got to make
I
it
know
happen again. We can
one of
do this.
my dreams like what would I do if I was just rich, didn't have to do anything, and had money to spend on stuff? So I was like, I would build like some sort of ultimate Rock Band uh like stage concert thing with like give me an Xbox or maybe a PC with like Clone Hero and just has every single song that's ever been in
Oh
Rock Band.
yeah.
That
That'd be
would be so
sick.
fun. And then be like, when parties happen, it's like, you wanna play some freaking rock band? And you've got, like, all the really nice
And the
instruments and, like
curtains open and you have a
yeah, and there's, like, a
stage and
smoke
it's
machine and lasers and lights, and, like, that would be so fun. I think
that
that'd
would
be so
be
fun.
so great. I love this. We're already revolutionizing the arcade idea, the barcade idea
Yeah,
here with what we got. Uh,
definitely.
I have a couple honorable mentions
Okay.
for games at arcades that I enjoy. I like any Jurassic Park game because everyone knows on this podcast I love dinosaurs and
Mhm,
everything Jurassic Park. The Luigi's Mansion game at Dave and Buster's, where you have the Poltergust vacuum cleaner, is very fun.
mhm.
And then it's not at Dave and Buster's. It's really only found at these older barcades or at movie theaters. Original Area 51.
Oh, yeah.
That was a strong game for me as a kid that I loved. And I actually played it at that Docking Bay 93. They had it. And I was like, if I could own a cabinet, it would
That's the
either
one.
be like Area 51 or it would be like that 4-player Pac-Man. Like that would
Yeah.
be so fun to me.
Well, when you come visit down here sometime, I can take you to my job, and we have an Area 51 machine.
What?
So,
And you've been playing?
come
You play it every day?
no, it's a
Probably
bit
every
of a
day.
walk for me from
Oh,
where I
really?
sit, but
That's
it
the workout. You got to walk to the Area 51 machine.
yeah, yeah, well, it's, yeah, there's an Area 51 machine that's super fun. I think also another thing that I would do in the same vein as the Rock Band thing is I would try to build, like, as close to as you can, like, a kind of universal arcade machine that has, like, an emulator in it, right?
Mhm.
That just has, like, just tons of arcade games. Obviously, you can't be perfect with that because, like, games with special controllers and stuff, but, like, I would try to build something that could, like, accommodate 4 people, maybe have a steering wheel or 2 if you can, like, put them away or something. I don't know, it'd be fun.
Some sort of like way you could attach and detach controller bases to the arcade machine based on what game you're playing. That
Yeah,
would be cool.
that could
Yeah.
be cool, yeah.
The crazy thing is, right now, we're in a good time if you want to build an arcade because there are like really good aftermarket light guns
Mhm.
and aftermarket controller. Like it's I'm not gonna say it's coming back because it's been here. Like building your own arcade has been a thing for a long time, but the it's never been a better time as far as getting those like aftermarket parts that are really high
Yeah,
quality, which is kind
yeah.
of neat. So I don't know. I'm happy as far as arcades in 2023 go. I'm happy they still exist. I'm sad they have to exist with this ticket model, but I understand that's like the thing.
Yeah. I like
And
the ones that are the ambiance more, where it's just like
me too.
this is a bar that is fun, and part of the aesthetic is that there are arcade machines, and, like, it's cool if they work, but honestly, I don't need them to work.
Yeah, my favorite games are the ones where you like ground control. Like ground control is to me the best one because you go there, you're there to play games. Sure, it's not free play, but at least you're there because the games. You're not there to try to win tickets or anything. You're just
Yeah,
there to
yeah.
hang out, and that's fun to me. Also, honorable mention for an arcade machine, and I didn't put this on our list. Have you ever played the game Killer Queen?
No.
Killer Queen is a 6-player arcade game where there's 3 on one side, 3 on the other. So you don't look at each other. And you're
Okay.
on the same map and there's multiple win conditions where you got to put these like pieces in a honeycomb into something, and when you fill that up you win. There's a snail on the bottom that you can help push along, and if you do that you win. Or you can like level up and become a killer queen and kill the enemy to win. There's like 3
Oh,
different win cons, and because of that the games are actually really competitive. And this game actually in 2013 2014 when I did Bridgetown Comedy Festival was being trialed at Ground Control, and now it's out, and it's like a national arcade game that's out, and it's very good. And
okay.
it's
That's
really fun because it's like it's PvP, but for people that don't like that, you could be the person on your team whose whole job is just to collect the honeycomb and like
yeah.
go do that. Or you could be the kind of person that's there to like push the snail. So it's fun because you have to pick a win condition and you can't see the other team because they're on the other side of the cabinet and they're picking their own win condition, and you have to like kind of go with the flow and figure it out. And
Hmm.
it's a simple game, but in that sense it gets complex because you're trying to decide the other team. I kind of want to know if there's been a tournament for
It's
Killer
like you're
Queen.
trying to win using whatever win condition you've selected for yourself, while maybe trying to stop them from
Yeah.
winning with their win condition, or
Mhm.
maybe you're competing over the same win condition.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it gets really heated, and like and you do like get really competitive, and it gets really heated, and it's an adult game too. It's like it's a children's game. Like if a child played it, it would make sense because you're a bee. But it gets really competitive, and it's really fun, and that's probably my favorite game to play in an arcade with 6 people. But if you don't play, but it's also fun because you can play with strangers. Like if strangers are on the machine and they need more people, just jump up there and play with them.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of fun. And I really enjoy that game. I completely forgot about it though until we started talking about this, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is
That
a
sounds
really
fun.
fun
I have
game.
to check
Yeah,
that out.
look up Killer Queen if you're interested in arcade games. Check it out. 10 out of 10. Would recommend.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like we did it. We talked a lot about arcades.
Yeah,
We
that's
got
a lot of arcade talk. I would love to hear what other folks, your memories of arcades, how you feel about the current state of arcades. Like, hit us up on Discord or in the
yeah.
YouTube comments or whatever.
We actually have people. We have a person that listens to us that made their own barcade. Remember?
Oh yeah.
So if they want to chime in, Codex History Podcast at gmail.com or go to codexpodcast.net, and all our stuff is there to talk to us about that. And also things you can do to support us. We would love it if you liked us wherever you like on YouTube, like the video or whatever.
Like us.
We just want you to like us. And also just giving us a good rating on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify helps us out a ton. That's like the best way. And also, I mean, well, actually the best way is to tell your friends. That's the best way. Just, we don't do any like marketing for this podcast. So just tell people, I guess. I don't know. But with that, I think that's going to be it for the day. Tyler, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Goodbye, everybody.